Sustainability's webinar on safeguarding the environment. Okay, I think we'll begin again. It's just starting to stream live. Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time to join us in the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability's webinar on safeguarding the environment. We have very distinguished panelists with us, and it is my pleasure to introduce them to all of you. I'm sure they do not need much of an introduction. We have Justice Swatantra Kumar, who has been a former chairperson of the National Green Tribunal, as well as a judge of the Supreme Court of India. He has also been formerly the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court and a judge of the Delhi and the Punjab and Haryana High Courts. Justice Kumar has been instrumental in delivering landmark decisions that have significantly, widened environmental jurisprudence in India. These have related to cleaning of rivers, air pollution, Himalayan glaciers, to name a few. He has had a remarkable record of disposing more than 82% of cases instituted before the NGT during his tenure. And for his contribution, he has been bestowed with 12 different awards, including the National Law Day Award, as well as Lifetime Achievement Awards. Justice Kumar has also been nominated as a member of the governing body of the Global Judicial Institute for Environment, which works under the UNEP, and he has addressed several international and national conferences organized by the United Nations and other international organizations. We are very pleased to have you with us, Justice Kumar. We have Dr. Armin Rosenkrantz, who is the founding dean of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability. He finished his Bachelor's of Arts in Princeton, and he went on to do his LLB and his Master's and his PhD in science, political science from Stanford University, where he was a professor as well as a former trustee. Not many of us know this, but Dr. Rosenkrantz has taught one of the first courses on environment law in India. His book titled Environment Law and Policy in India, which he's co-authored with Sham Diwan, has been widely quoted by the Supreme Court and the NGT. And he has also helped set up Bhutan's first law school quite recently. So we are very, very pleased to have both of you with us. My name is Raghuveer Nath, and briefly, I'm an academic consultant with the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability. I have formerly been an associate with Trilegal in their mergers and acquisitions and private equity practice. I'm co-authoring a book, a commentary on the National Green Tribunal with Dr. Rosenkrantz, which we will be publishing with Cambridge University Press later this year. So it is a pleasure to have all of you with us, and we hope that this will be an interesting conversation. Just some housekeeping announcements before we begin. To all participants, I just would like to highlight that the chat option has been disabled. If you do have questions, which we hope you do, because we will reserve some time for Q&A, kindly use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen to write any questions that you may have, and we will take it up towards the end. So just briefly, the flow of the entire conversation will be, I will begin by sharing some of my views, followed by Justice Swatantra Kumar highlighting his views on the topic of safeguarding the environment, following which he will take a few questions and we will engage in a conversation. After that, we will have Dr. Rosenkrantz speaking about the issue as well, followed by a brief Q&A from the audience. All right. So, so as we have all seen over the past couple of months, in the COVID lockdown, plants and animals are coming to their elements. We've seen raccoons sunbathing in Panama beaches. We've seen ducks walking around Champs-Élysées in Paris. Back here in India, we've seen Himalayas all the way from Jalandhar. This is because air pollution has dropped to a record low. So despite all the horrific consequences of, COVID-19, it seems that the pandemic has, to some extent, brought us closer to nature. So, this begs the question, why has it taken a pandemic for us all to realize the importance of environment in our lives? And to my mind, the answer lies basically in two different paradigms that we all, knowing or unknowingly, subscribe to. So we have on one side ecocentrism, and on the other side, we have anthropocentrism. So basically, just to explain this, anthropocentrism comes from the word anthropos, which essentially means humans. And it's a human centric approach. It means that all of us look at the environment through human lens. We value environment based on what human beings want and what human beings need. In contrast, ecocentrism, values environment for itself. It does not attach a value based on what our wants and needs are. So just to illustrate this, sometime back in the early 1950s, there was a case in North America in which we had a factory polluting a pond. And when the matter came up before the court, a survey was ordered to see how valuable the pond was to the people living close to it. Sadly, not many people visited that pond because there was a lake nearby and they went, to the lake instead of the pond. And because they did not answer the survey very favorably, the court attached a very low value to the pond, and eventually a very small environmental compensation was ordered. So, this just is an example to highlight how we view the environment in terms of, our own wants and needs, and how we value it according to that. Now, luckily, Indian environmental jurisprudence has come a far, far way from that, and we are far more robust. And of course, in part, thanks to Justice Kumar's work. But if we truly believe in ecocentrism, the logical conclusion of this approach follows that, the environment has a legal right, just like humans do. So now, this was first argued by Christopher D. Stone back in 1972 in his book, Should Trees Have Standing? And if we truly want to understand the argument, we should just take a moment and think, what would it be like if trees, animals, were actually accorded legal rights just in the same manner that we human beings have? So for instance, if you went and you cut down a tree illegally, a case could be filed, or say if you, you polluted the river Ganga, a case could be filed saying river Ganga versus XYZ. So, I mean, while this now some of you might know that, not know this, this has already happened, back in 2017 when the Uttarakhand High Court declared River Ganga as a living entity. Of course, we have not yet reached the threshold of a legal entity, but this is something that the discourse has already begun. So, this might look a little shocking to some of us, but I would like to say that it's not a matter of if, but it's only a matter of when, we also start viewing animals, trees, the environment in general as having proper legal rights. I mean, just until a few hundred years ago, Black people were not regarded as human beings and did not, have rights and were slaves. Likewise, until recently, women were not given basic rights. So it is only natural as society progresses that we will accord environment the rights that it deserves, and we will move from an anthropocentric to a very ecocentric approach. I would now like to invite and begin our conversation with Justice Kumar. Over to you, sir.
Well, firstly, I would like to thank Professor Armin and both and the Jindal University and the Department of Environment for having provided me with an opportunity to speak to you, all the attendees who have interest in the subject which have been taken up. First and the foremost thing we need to understand is that what is environment? Just now we mentioned about human-centric and ecocentric approaches. Now see, the legislature in India was very wise, and I must compliment the legislature. If you kindly see the definition of environment as it is given under our act is that it is land, water, air, human beings, and interrelation between all the three and any living creature. I don't think anybody could imagine a definition of such a wider magnitude which will include even an insect to be protected. Now, then they explain under section 2 itself that the pollution. Now, pollution is any gaseous, water, or airy substance which is such concentration is likely to hurt the environment. Kindly see the ambit of environment as defined by the legislature in India. You possibly cannot have, by any standards, any wider definition, and therefore, once we accept, and which we have no choice, as citizens, we must accept that definition of environment, then you can see that at a constitutional framework, our framers of the Constitution placed environment at a very high pedestal. You have a threefold obligations under the Constitution, besides being more significant being the fundamental rights. You have to have under the directive principle state obligation to maintain environment, to keep environment clean. It has a duty on the citizens to maintain and keep the environment clean and do everything they can do to ensure that there is no environmental degradation. Then comes the most important facet of our environment, which is under Article 21. This is fundamentally a judicial creativity. It is the judges of the Supreme Court of India who created the new dimensions to Article 21 of the Constitution and gave environment and right to environment, decent environment as a fundamental right. So that is the constitutional and statutory emphasis of the environment in our country. In light of this, let's see, do we have a duty to safeguard the environment? I think that by no stretch of imagination, the answer could be in the negative. It has to be in the positive, that as a state organ, as a citizen, as a corporate body, as a legislature, we owe a duty, constitutional and statutory, to safeguard, and not only safeguard, but to protect the environment and do all that we can do for that purpose and in that direction. That would be the first phase I would like to talk to you. The question that arises is that to do that, what is the essential thought process, or what is the proper way of examining that environmental protection is not defeated? The first and the foremost, I would just keep it under 3 points. First would be, it should be a pragmatic, incentive-oriented approach for whichever stakeholder it might be. Secondly, there should be a complete change in the mindset. You cannot, but just to give you a small example, is the need for installation of the waste to energy plants or waste dealing plants. Now, every colony in Delhi or across the nation, the moment there is a plan for setting up a waste to energy plant, you run to the courts. Not in my backyard. Please go to somebody else's backyard. So this mindset must change. See, the waste to energy plants can be like gardens. We have an example in Delhi now. We have examples in Goa now, where the waste to energy plants are absolutely non-polluting and are sight to watch. So therefore, you have to have a change in the mindset in relation to every activity of environment. And the last thing that I would say in that behalf is that we have enough laws, enough regulations, enough instructions, enough published material. What we need is proper regulation of law and respect for law. Today, the regulatory authorities really are not able to do their job appropriately. I would say that alone. Therefore, regulation of the existing laws and respect for law must exist to achieve safeguard for the purposes of environment. So to just put it very simply, now if we say that, you know, on the nutshell, if we say it, it straight away comes to the progress of Article 21 must be mentioned in the interest of the environment. Now, the Supreme Court, in the case of Olga, Talis, and others versus Bombay Municipal Corporation, recognized the right to livelihood. Now, right to life and right to livelihood is fundamental to clean environment. If you do not have that, then I do not think you can protect or safeguard your environment. If you have random health problem across the state, if you have livelihood problems across the state, if you have poverty across the state, then probably your preference or your priorities for environment will obviously stand changed and the environment is bound to suffer. Look at the way the right to environment came into existence. Firstly, nobody believed that when you talk of right to life, it doesn't mean animal existence. Then you go to Kehar Singh's case, you go to Maneka Gandhi's case, and then finally to Sunil Batra's case, when the Supreme Court brought up that to right to live with dignity is the right, then even to maintain your heritage, and then came that the right to decent environment is your fundamental right. So that's the constitutional and statutory background. I would just say one line to say that you have to be saying it without demur that our constitutional and statutory obligation is to safeguard and protect the environment and natural resources. Having said that, I would refer to some of my experiences in the National Green Tribunal, of which Professor Amin was very particular about, and I respect his thought. See, the National Green Tribunal, heavily administratively, I had no issues. I want to talk to you about environmental cases when I was chairman of the National Green Tribunal. You know, we had challenging cases, as Raghubir mentioned. We had Ganga cleaning, Yamuna cleaning. Then we had glaciers. Then we had forests cases. Then we had road developments. Then they had builders cases. Now see, all of them had one idea in mind. It was conflict of economic interests with protection of environmental interests. Now, development, if you misunderstand, see, development, nobody probably across the globe can argue that you should not have development. What you need to do is you should have sustainable development. That is what the legislative intent under Section 20 of the National Green Tribunal is. That you should apply these three principles, that is the sustainable development, precautionary principle, and polluter pays principle. Now, these are the principles you will apply and test. And wherever it comes to your mind that the damage to the environment is either irreversible or is so substantial that it will consequentially do a lot of damage to human health and society. You must stop the activity. Now you please kindly be clear about it. We had very challenging cases. See, it was development of environmental jurisprudence in India. And I do feel concerned and believe that even the international bodies like UNEP recognize the contribution and development of environmental jurisprudence in India. Now, taking a case of Ganga, I would just take 1 minute of all of you because I think some things you really need to see, to believe, and to be sure as to how they happen and what makes them happen. Now, if you kindly remember, we had the case of Ganga, which I just want to show you this video which somebody has sent to me. Please kindly watch it carefully. I hope it is visible to all of you. This is River Ganga on 20th of June, 2020. Now, please kindly see this water you can drink from the river. What has happened? You know, only one thing, of course, it has not happened because of some good event. The coronavirus or the COVID-19 has hit the globe very hard. And it is as a consequence of such drastic, disease that people have stuck to their homes. We have started respecting lockdown. And what I would like to say is that once human intervention, now this shows you one thing very clearly, that once human intervention is regulated or stopped, then it is bound to revive the natural resources. Now the Ganga water, which you were scared of touching now because of, the kind of discharge waste that was being put into it, the chemicals that were being thrown into it, now you can see that you can drink that water from the river, and that was river Gangaji is. It has the qualities scientifically proved of cleaning its own water as well as other waters that meets it. So what I want to tell you is this, that when we were dealing with Ganga case, it was a very big challenge because every state has its own view. The regulatory authorities have its own view. Public has its own view. Nobody wants to give up what he or the organ of the state was doing. So we had to plan out. The jurisdiction was extended. So the first principle that applied to this case was expansion of jurisdiction. Because if you don't expand the jurisdiction, you obviously can't do anything. Then there was help to take expert advice from them. Now, for expert, we constitute a very high-powered committee, which included scientists, professors from IIT, and the best people on the ground to deal with the prevention of pollution of River Ganga. They submitted reports. We divided River Ganga into 4 portions. Now, the first portion was from Gangotri to Hardwar. And this portion was fully covered by the judgment. That's how you find it little clean today. Little clean, I think substantially clean today. Now, the other part is from Hardwar, that means UP to Bihar. Bihar to Madhya Pradesh to it goes to, and the last leg is of the West Bengal. Now, these are the different portions which require different treatments. Now, we even had to tell that there were 132 drains which were joining River Ganga in the second bed, that is Hardwar to Kanpur. Kanpur, as you know, tannery-based industry was the maximum polluter of this part. So industries, including sugar mills, thermal plants, everybody was regulated under that order, and we were very contented that we could pass directions which The regulatory authorities helped and they were implementing, and therefore there was greater implementation of law. Therefore, I say you must have spirit to implement law. That is a sense of environmental protection in our, not only in India, but I think across the world, and more particularly in Asian countries. Now, the principle of proportionality, reasonableness, there is all of you have referred to the COVID-19. Now, COVID-19, it hurts your constitutional rights, but the rights under the interstate management of migrant labor and the Epidemic Act, all these are inbuilt restrictions which are in larger public interest, and they accept the applicability in the interest of environment of reasonableness, proportionality in India and even in other jurisdictions, including the South African courts, which have accepted it largely. Now, I just come to the last thing which I would like to share with you, that during the NGT tenure, I realized that we as a country, once we get together, we are capable of resolving any problem. And environmental problems were not easy to solve. They were very difficult to solve. It took time to persuade the authorities concerned, the stakeholders concerned, the industries concerned to come together in the interest of environment and ultimately their lives. Today, I was just mentioning in the other webinar I had, the professor from Harvard, he has said that the COVID-19 is result of, violation of natural respect. We don't have respect for natural resources, and this is the result of that. But some good things have happened. Hygiene, collection of waste, working from home, less traffic. This can be continued. I don't say you should have lockdowns, but you can certainly pick up these things and make it part of your day-to-day living, which will help. In the NGT, again, coming back, I had the occasion to have, and very happy to say that all my technical experts, all judicial members, always had unanimity in all the judgments. I think we passed n number of judgments. I can't even count the number, but they all were unanimous. So we used to have a great deliberation. That is what the consultative process of stakeholders was introduced to get the idea of the industry before you pass an order which is not implemented. It was an uphill task, but by God's grace and cooperation and coordination of the people and the members, it did work out and we were able to achieve. I would only suggest one thing, that institutionally, it is very important that you should have a very strong, high-powered regulatory mechanism if you want your environment to be controlled. Damage to environment and nature would give you back something worse than what you are seeing. It is not a result. Maybe let's not get into the question, it is man-made or nature-made. But one thing is certain, that if you do exploit unduly your natural resources, you will definitely lead yourself into health problems, universal problems, and environment. Now today, you can see clean sky, you can see clean rivers. Even Yamuna is reported to have rejuvenated to a larger extent. We passed very detailed judgment about Yamuna. The short question and short thing I'll tell you on sustainable development, and leave it for, because we must go to our learned professor for good learning. So we had a case where in Simla, a person bought there was a hill, Tara Devi, there is a hill, full-fledged hill. It had more than 700 trees, which were more than 100 years old. So they transacted and the builder bought it. And believe it or not, in one night, he chopped off all the 700 trees. One night. And this was In the papers I read in Simla, I was on a bench in Simla at that time, and we issued a suo motu notice. We prohibit that construction. We made the government and that builder and the owner of the property replant all double the number. That means 4,000 trees were directed to be planted. Now, there were spaces in that hill that he could have made small cottages. No, he wanted to make a five-storied, five-star hotel. So this was direct conflict between economic gains and damage to nature. Principle of sustainable development was thrown to winds. We made him sure that, okay, now you get stuck. We fined him, I think, if I don't mistake, something like 50 lakhs, plus all trees to be replanted, plus 4,000 trees, and no construction to be raised on that hill. But certainly we can't revive the environmental correction by that hill overnight. That took 100 years. Lack of oxygen, lack of consumption of carbon. Therefore, once you do damage, resetting it takes a lot of time. Simple message: respect nature and live a better life. Thank you, all of you, please.
Thank you, sir. That's a wonderful message for all of us to think about. And as you said, you've been responsible for the expansion of the NGT's jurisdiction, as well as you've been an advocate for the suo motu jurisdiction of the NGT, and that is something all of us really thank you for, all environmentally sensitive citizens. Sir, I will, given that we are slightly short on time, before going to Dr. Rosenkranz, I will just ask a couple of questions so that we can engage in a conversation. And so you had mentioned how the need of the hour is having a pragmatic approach, as well as the fact that we need a complete change of mindset. You highlighted how there are a plethora of laws, regulations already in place, but what we truly need is a change of mindset. So, in your experience, what do you think is the reason why it has actually taken a pandemic like COVID-19 for us to realize the importance of NGT? Why is it that we need this wake-up call? Why does this apathy exist today?
See, you should, I think it's just one line answer, please, that human beings are more difficult species to handle than any other species in the universe. I told you fundamentally it's the economic conflicts which, that I told you, just a small example, Suppose you have to make a house in a hill. Why can't you make it in terms of the nature that exists there? Why do you have to make a five-story building and without that you won't feel satisfied? So the purpose is don't destroy nature, and you be sure it's not the last thing we are seeing. I don't think COVID-19 is the last thing this planet is going to see. If the scientists, if the astrologers, what they say is true, we're going to have a lot of tough times. And if we don't check ourselves now, it's going to be definitely bad for us. I don't think intergenerational equity principle is to be respected.
Right. No, thank you for that, sir. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's part of human nature to, succumb to greed, if I may. Sir, just, a couple of concerns that we want your view on. So, I mean, you have passed some wonderful landmark judgments, but so we have seen that under the Environmental Impact Assessment Notification, the EIA notification 2006, we initially had a 600-day period, sir, for screening projects, for understanding what are the stakeholders likely to face once the project is ready. We had economic, sociological, scientific analysis done. But so it seems that now, the most recent draft of the notification has reduced this to, I think, about 180 days. And we have more press reports coming in that this will further be reduced to 100 days. So what would your view be on this, and what do you think would be the repercussions of this reduction?
See, time factor by itself is not fatal to anything. If you have the capacity to do something which you used to do in 300 days, in 180 days, very good. Nothing wrong in it. What adherence to the spirit of law is the sense. If the notification provides three stages, that is examination, that is public hearing, that is analysis of the uh, application, and then what damage it will do to nature. That is the basic purpose. So if you are complying with the substantive law with a respect for it, then time per se is immaterial. But I'm told under the proposed notification, there are some changes which are not probably tilted towards, you know, environmental protection, and they may cause injury to the environment.
Right, sir. No, thank you for that. Just on a side note, I would like to tell our viewers that we are also live on Facebook as well as on YouTube, so you can also tune in from there if that's more convenient. Sir, my last question, sir, to you would be, what can the youth, in general, and students in particular, do for environment and the sustainability of environment, and how do you think a course in the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability can help students to make a difference?
See, firstly, I think I should compliment your university for starting such a department and a course. Secondly, see, the youth is the only solution for environmental protection. Because if you are able to inject and make it a thought process of the young generation that environmental protection is paramount to development, and particularly unsustainable development, then you would have served the purpose for 100 years to come. Because see, today an average life is something like 80 plus. Now, if that be so, the students today would serve the country for coming 80 years. And therefore, in the chain of events, some of them may be bureaucrats, leaders, lawyers or judges or anybody, professors. So they will be able to carry forward the idea of environmental protection further and further. And as I told you, the few points of duties that I have given, that you should have the sense of those duties in your mind, that I would look after. And see, we have a very big advantage in our country, in the family system we have in India, that if son says something, or the young child girl says something, the father will 100% do it. But if somebody else from outside tells him, he may not do it. So we have that, chain, family weakness chain going on. So this will be very advantageous that they learn the environmental protection principles and spread them in their family and take it forward in their life.
Thank you so much, sir. That's so wonderfully said. Absolutely. Uh, I would now like to invite Dr. Rosencrantz to please share his views on safeguarding the environment.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say what a great honor it is to share the hour with Swatanta Kumar, who has been the head of probably the premium environmental tribunal in the world. There are, out of the 200 countries that we have, there are only a handful that have environmental tribunals. India is one of those handfuls, and the National Green Tribunal is arguably the most capable and most distinguished of all the environmental tribunals in the world. Okay, so we, as you've already been told, the environment is air, water, land, food, soil, toxic chemicals, pollutants, and we're also involved with all living creatures, many of which are under threat. We have, because of climate change, some people have estimated that 100 times the average the average endangered species loss is created by climate change. So in other words, change is endangering 100 times the normal loss of biodiversity. And that includes tigers, the national symbol of India, elephants. The Sundarban has all these, has 40% or more of the tigers in the world. So it's our duty to protect nature, to protect biodiversity, and to protect the environment. Within that protection of the environment, we have climate. Climate change is happening before our very eyes. And you, the people participating in this webinar and watching us from afar, are the pioneers, essentially, in environmental protection and in reducing and maybe eliminating the impacts of climate change. Climate change, you know, is involved not only in biodiversity loss, the melting of the polar ice caps, the change of hydrology so that there are many more floods and droughts than there otherwise would be, the migration of humans caused by lack of water, lack of trees. So it seems to me that we have an obligation to educate ourselves in environmental studies to understand the link between our individual choices and the planet, the safety and health of our planet. We can make choices on whether to walk, to ride a bicycle, to take a car, a bus, a train, a plane. All of these have different consequences on the planetary resources. So what we need to do is we need to have environmental studies, and we need to enlist all the people watching this webinar to think about joining the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability to understand the resources of the world and how endangered and fragile they are. For example, we have in our daily lives, we can choose what to eat. And we know that a plant-based diet is much less impactful on the environment than eating meat. When we choose to eat meat, we magnify the global resources that would otherwise be taken by plants. Eating beef, for example, involves feed of the cattle and water, and that is an enormous drain on the planetary resources. So choosing to eat plants, vegetables, as opposed to meat is itself a very large and impactful choice. In terms of renewable energy, which is the answer, one of the main answers to climate change is to have renewable, sustainable energy. We have various means of doing that: net metering, easy grid connections, solar panels, and we all need to be informed about rational and informed and choices to be able to take on the challenge of the global environmental problems that we have to deal with. We have climate change, biodiversity loss. We have to protect the species of the earth. We have to protect the land, air, and water, as Justice Kumar has already indicated. And we want you to be able to work for the public sector, government, for example, the private sector, corporations, which are oriented now toward sustainable resource consumption, and the civil society, all the NGOs. Any of them will have opportunities for your work after you graduate from wherever you are, hopefully Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability. So that's basically what I have to say, keeping in mind we're not only dealing with air, water, land, soil, chemicals, we're also dealing with the protection of all living creatures, plants and animals, and any other living creature that exists with us. We share the planet with all of those living creatures, and we owe it to them to protect them and to preserve them and perpetuate them into the next several generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Armin. That was very, very insightful. And I'm sure that would kindle more interest in people to think about pursuing environment as a career. And now we will head to the Q&A part of the webinar. The first question that we have is from Mohit Kumar. And it is, I would like Justice Kumar to answer this. And he has asked that, the Honorable Supreme Court has in several instances indicated that environmental science, should compulsorily be taught in all schools and colleges in some form or the other. But, in most government schools or most other private schools, it's being taught like in the form of, with other subjects like, say, chemistry or Hindi or history. And so he wants to know, sir, what is it that he can do and what is it that we all can do to change this and to have more of a focused subject on environment in schools and colleges?
Well, this is a very appropriate suggestion. You should have courses, which are environment related and directly on environment. Now, see, environment jurisprudence has converted into various fields of science. So social sciences now, like social science as a subject, when I was in school or somewhere, the only word we heard was social science. Now you have social sciences divided into 101 topics which you can teach. Therefore, teaching this in schools, in colleges, and then have a specialized education in environmental studies is probably need of the hour. I'm very happy to say that I went to one of the schools here in, I think it was, I forget the name exactly, but the toddler school, I'm not sure whether I should go, I should not go. But I went and the children were there till 5th or 6th class. And they held a week celebrations only to show how environment can be kept clean. And and I was interviewed by a 5-year-old child on environment, and I felt like anything in the world. Therefore, I say this environmental consciousness must come at all levels, and all students must opt voluntarily. It's your life. As Professor Armin just said, water, land, what else is in this world? If you get out of a Mercedes and you can't breathe, what worth it is? So that's what I think. It should be part of education system. I do agree.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. I hope that answers your question, Mohit. Armin, we have a question for you. And, so it's anonymous, and it says that usually environmental issues, involve a lot of complexities in the sense that, you have to look at it from an economic as well as a scientific or say even a sociological angle, to actually understand the contours of a problem. How will JSES address that? Will it, mainly be a scientific course? Will it also have elements of humanities in it? Over to you, Armin.
Thank you. Well, JSES will have several orientations. Science and humanities will certainly be part of it. The first course we'll have is science, ecology, biology, demography. We'll also have human and environment interactions, which are the social science that Justice Kumar talked about. Social science, history, economics, political science, geography. Then we'll have climate change and energy, including national and international institutions regarding climate change and energy. And our role is to organize and appreciate what is being done internationally and try to get domestic enforcement of these international standards, like the polluter pays principle, the precautionary principle, the public trust doctrine. All of these are up to domestic law to address. And then we'll have an introduction to environmental regulation, which means all the laws, the Constitution, and the regulations and the judgments of the courts relating to the environment. And finally, we'll be focused on forests and wildlife. Wildlife we've already mentioned, tigers and elephants in the Sundarban region are going to be threatened. They are already threatened. Elephant ivory and tiger bones are being sold across the border to China. For some reason, the Chinese tiger parts. And so India is the main supplier of that. And finally, we will have a focus on forest rights, the tribal people, the forest dwellers, the land in the forest needs to be protected. And we have a lot of our laws and judgments are focused on protecting forests and also wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Armin. Absolutely. So, just to add on to that, I feel that the need of the hour actually is to have a holistic view about the environment. We cannot just focus on, say, development versus the environment, because there are so many more stakeholders that are, required to be taken into account, and we have to look at other aspects. And I think JSCS is likely to give that holistic understanding, and that is where truly the opportunity lies to make a difference. We have a question from Tamogna Chattopadhyay, and I think I'll take this question, and it asks, what is the reason for the birth of the NGT? And of course, Justice Kumar, you can correct me, if I'm wrong. But at least to my understanding, the NGT was a natural consequence. Prior to the NGT, the Supreme Court, throughout the public interest litigation, the PIL regime, handled environmental cases in a manner that no other judiciary had ever done across the world. You had epistolary jurisdiction, whereby you could write a letter and the court would take it up. You had justices talking to people, taking up articles written in the newspaper, and really safeguarding the environment very, very proactively. And that is actually the time when the Indian Supreme Court was known as the world's, and probably still is, the most powerful judiciary in the world. And so what was eventually felt, there were 3 judgments of the Supreme Court, which highlighted that we need the NGT, because as Armin was saying, environmental cases have to be looked at in a very, very holistic manner. You have to have expertise, you have to have technical expertise, and people who actually understand what the contours of an environmental damage are. And given that, there were 2 attempts. We had the NET, that the National Environmental Tribunal. We had the NEAA, that's the National Environmental Appellate Authority. Both were attempts, but then the Supreme Court pushed for the creation of the NGT to ensure, and mind you, this is, as Armin mentioned, one of the only few dedicated courts in the world. And this was in line with several, international treaties and agreements. And that is what gave birth to the NGT. And you would be happy to know, in fact, in the last 9 or say almost a decade, the NGT has disposed almost 31,000 cases. And, Justice Kumar has done a very commendable job along with his expert and, judicial members in the bench. We will now take one more last question actually for the evening. And Justice Kumar, perhaps you can answer this. And it says that, in your vast experience, you have, adjudicated upon so many cases, you have addressed so many environmental issues. What is that one particular issue which is perhaps the most significant to your mind that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, facing the environment today?
Well, this is something I wonder I can pinpoint it all because, see, environment is a subject of the poorest and the richest. It's the subject of smallest project and the biggest project in the country. So environmental questions are no way related to be, so but I told you the work in NGT was very challenging, and I did feel very concerned about environment, and whatever the tribunal would do, it did. So I don't think I can pinpoint, but there are n number of cases which had significance. Even the ship case which we had an international impact on oil spills. Then glaciers, Ganga, Yamuna, then waste to energy. Then a poor man coming to you saying that, look, I am being dispossessed, as he said, from the tribal areas. My forest rights are being violated, and therefore forest rights are being interfered. So there's environment you can't. Environment is a subject of anybody and everybody. So to him, everything is important. So I thought all cases were good, important, and valuable.
Right. Thank you very much. We thank everyone who has attended the webinar, and we hope that the insights of having such a distinguished panel with me, along with Dr. Rosenkrantz and Justice Kumar, and their wealth of experience in safeguarding the environment, both academically as well as in their adjudicatory capacity, have been of use to all of us today and has given us some food for thought. And as Justice Kumar said, India has a very strong family system. So if we do all imbibe these conversations at home, probably change is likely to kickstart in a much, much more rapid way from home than any court, than any law can do for us. So thank you everyone for taking out the time. And I would like to again thank Justice Kumar and Dr. Rosenkrantz for being with us all today.
Thank you.